It's time for Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt. Todd Marquardt, attorney at law in Texas. If you're a millionaire or a thousandaire, Talk Law Radio is now on the air. Call in with your business law question, your elder law question, veteran aid, Medicaid, build a business to get paid. 210-308-8867. Or ask a question online at marquardtlawfirm.com. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com. And now it's Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt.
Welcome to Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. This is our special Sunday edition of Talk Law Radio, where I talk about your hidden legal issue blind spots while you listen to me talk about the law on the radio. I'm going to be on 6:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. on Saturday mornings simultaneously at 11 o'clock in the morning. If you want to learn more, you can always tune in there, or you can listen to podcasts everywhere, YouTube or Facebook. And today we're going to be talking about the lawsuit against the Homeland Security by the state of Texas, specifically the lawsuit concerning the concertina wire, more popularly known as razor wire because it is razor sharp. Anyway, the state of Texas filed a lawsuit against the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, because Homeland Security has been cutting the razor wire to let in immigrants coming up through the southern border from Mexico into Texas. And the state of Texas bought that wire and is upset that it's being cut. So they filed a lawsuit. And I'm going to be talking about the progress of that lawsuit from the federal district court to the Court of Appeals. And then something has also been filed with the United States Supreme Court. So it starts with an opinion filed November 29th, 2023, State of Texas versus Department of Homeland Security. Alejandro Mayorkas, in his official capacity as Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, U.S. Border Patrol, Troy A. Miller, in his official capacity as Acting Commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Jason Owens, in his official capacity as Chief of the U.S. Border Patrol, and Juan Bernal, in his official capacity as Acting Chief Border Patrol Agent Del Rio Sector, U.S. Border Patrol. Those are all of the defendants. That's a lot of defendants. I just wanted to be specific there. And this was filed in the United States District Court for the Western District of Texas in the Del Rio Division. So I'm going to tell you what exactly happened in this case at the very outset. What happened is that this case is still pending. The state of Texas wanted temporary restraining orders and did get restraining orders 2 times, and then asked for a preliminary injunction to stop the Homeland Security and Border Patrol from cutting the razor wire, but that was denied. The preliminary injunction would have stopped them from cutting razor wire for the whole case, and that was denied because of something very detailed and technical in the law. I'll start with this. Basically, you can't sue the federal government unless they allow themselves to be sued. And the principle there is called sovereign immunity. And so the damages that the state of Texas is seeking for conversion, which is like stealing, that was thrown out because the federal government doesn't allow itself to be sued for conversion. But it does allow itself to be sued under something called the Administrative Procedures Act. And so the whole preliminary injunction rested on whether the Border Patrol had a final agency action, like a final rule that where the Department of Homeland Security had decided that it was going to be cutting razor wire as an official rule. And the court, this district court, found that they were going to deny Texas' request for a preliminary injunction because the court said that Texas was unlikely to win in its argument that Homeland Security made a final agency action regarding a policy pattern or practice of destroying Texas's concertina wire to encourage and assist thousands of aliens to illegally cross the Rio Grande and enter. I think that the attorneys for the state of Texas made a mistake when they made this argument. Let me point back to the language of this that I think they should have left out. So the argument was that the Border Patrol had a final agency action, which is like a rule, that they had a rule, that they had a policy, that they had a pattern and practice of destroying the razor wire. And here's the part that I think they should have left out: to encourage and assist thousands of aliens to illegally cross. Well, why would the government make a rule to encourage and assist lawbreaking, illegal action? That's ridiculous. And so I would have, as an attorney, if I was working for the state of Texas, I would have left that part out. I would have just said that they seem to have a final agency action regarding a policy pattern or practice of destroying Texas's concertina wire, period. And then maybe they would have prevailed on their request for a preliminary injunction. But here's something else that I want to talk to you about. When I was researching sovereign immunity so that I could better explain it to you, I ran across a very old Supreme Court case that discussed sovereign immunity, and so I want to tell you about it. The reason it's interesting to me is because this is where probate law, the law governing deceased persons' estates, and constitutional law sort of come together. Well, remember the Revolutionary War? Well, during the war, the state of Georgia wanted to get supplies. And there was an individual named Captain Robert Farquhar who provided supplies to the state of Georgia on credit. And the state of Georgia did not pay him for those supplies. Well, some time went by, and Captain Robert died. Still hadn't been paid back. So the executor of his estate filed a lawsuit against the state of Georgia for payment. Somehow it got to the Supreme Court, and there was, it went through some court battle, and the Supreme Court, I was on track, did decide that the state of Georgia would have to pay. And so the people didn't like that ruling, and so then the 11th Amendment to the United States Constitution was passed in regards to sovereign immunity. And so I just thought it was interesting how the probate and the constitutional law sort of converged. And there was a lot of discussion during this time about sovereign immunity. One circumstance which the United States federal government today waives its sovereign immunity is regarding the Administrative Procedures Act. And so that's why the state of Texas needs to come up with an argument to prove that it's likely to prevail on its argument that the United States government, through the Homeland Security and Border Patrol, had this official policy rule of cutting the wire. So, again, that argument was lost at the district court level. The state of Texas appealed, and the Fifth Circuit for the Court of Appeals granted the request for a preliminary injunction pending the outcome of the case. And then Homeland Security filed a request to the United States Supreme Court to an application to vacate the injunction pending appeal. Vacate means to stop the injunction, so that would allow them to continue to cut the razor wire. And I want to make another distinction here. There's razor wire on the land. This is a separate case from the buoys with razor wire around them in the water. So there's a separate lawsuit for that. So this filing with the United States Supreme Court is wants the Supreme Court to intervene in this case. And, of course, the state of Texas wants the Supreme Court to not intervene. And this is all about 29 miles on the land next to the Rio Grande River. And so you may have seen these photos in the news, or even there was some video of the Border Patrol cutting the wire so that they can get to these immigrants that are coming over through the water. And one of the arguments that the Border Patrol makes is that there's sometimes when immigrants are drowning in the water and Border Patrol needs to get to them to save their lives. And so there was some argument about that. But the state of Texas complained that there was a video showing where there was a gap in the razor wire that was already existing, and then some 10 feet away, the Border Patrol was cutting another gap in the razor wire, and then some 10 feet away from that, they were cutting another gap. And the Border Patrol argued that it was necessary because in the other area it was slippery or something like that. But what do you think? Do you think that the state of Texas should have to defend its own border, or is this something that the federal government should be doing? And or should it just be open like it was before? It's something that you can weigh in on. You can email me at host@talklawradio.com. That's HOST@talklawradio.com. Let me know how you feel about the razor wire on the border. And if you're interested in this subject, tune in to the show that I recorded on Saturday, January 13th, in which I interview El Conservador, George Rodriguez. We had a lengthy discussion about border protection and security. We talked about Texas Senate Bill 4, and we talked also about whether Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas should be impeached. And you can find that on podcasts everywhere, Facebook Live, or YouTube. And today I just wanted to talk about the razor wire case because it's been in the news lately. for some reason, Homeland Security and Border Protection want to be able to cut this razor wire that the state of Texas is putting up. And even more recently in the news, we've been hearing reports that the Texas National Guard and the state police have been blocking the Border Patrol from getting access to a certain portion of the border in Eagle Pass. So tune in for more on that too. Back to our court case, there's a pleading, a petition to vacate the preliminary injunction. And so the argument here is that the federal government law and regulations and immigration law in particular is supreme. There's a supremacy clause that says federal law is supreme over state law or local law, city laws, municipal laws. And even the state of Texas, this last legislative session, passed a bill that said that state law would be supreme over municipal law. So the Homeland Security is arguing that because immigration is federal law and it's the duty of the executive branch to enforce the immigration laws, that the state of Texas should not be putting razor wire down there, and they shouldn't be arresting and deporting illegal immigrants. So there's also Senate Bill 4, which you've probably heard about, that amends the penal code to include penalties for coming into the state of Texas illegally, coming into the United States through the state of Texas illegally. And supremacy clause there is at issue as well. So back to this pleading that the Homeland Security filed with the United States Supreme Court. They say, under the supremacy clause, state law cannot be applied to restrain those federal agents from carrying out their federally authorized activities. And there's some court cases cited there. The Homeland Security says that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling violates that supremacy clause by requiring federal law to yield to Texas law. And its rationale would leave the federal government at the mercy of the states, and they don't want that. So how do you feel about immigration and illegal immigration and asylum? Many of these immigrants coming across the border now are claiming asylum because they're in fear for their safety. So I wanted to talk about asylum just a little bit. Back in March 20th, 2021, I interviewed attorney Shannon Salmon Haas about immigration and asylum, and she told, so you can search for that episode if you want to hear more about asylum, because that's the argument that lots of these immigrants are claiming. She said asylum is granted to individuals from foreign countries seeking protection in the United States because they feel they cannot safely return to their home country. The United States currently offers asylum to those who will face persecution or fear they will face persecution due to their race, religion, nationality, social status, or political beliefs. Asylum is also given to people who may be harmed by their own government if they return to their country. So a person may apply for asylum status regardless of current immigration status or how they arrived in the country. And I heard one of the congressmen, or I heard somebody on the news say that from the beginning of their claim to the adjudication of their claim, it takes about 6 years. And so for that time, that 6-year time period, the person who has really no status here in the United States is still here in the United States. And something that President Trump's administration did is they had a rule that said you had to remain in Mexico, or the first country that you arrived to after you left your country. And so a lot of times that was Mexico, and it was known as the Remain in Mexico policy. And, ever since President Biden has been acting as president, they stopped that and allowed people to come into the United States and just stay here, waiting for their court date 6 years later. And so in my mind, that's really the part of the law that needs to be fixed, or they need to hire 1 million new judges to start adjudicating these claims much more quickly. Most of the asylum claims are not granted because it's hard to prove that you're being persecuted or that you're afraid of being persecuted for those specific reasons. A lot of the people claiming asylum want to come to the United States because they're poor. They have no food, they have no work, and they want to take care of their family. Well, those are honorable reasons to want to come to the United States, but it's not one of the reasons that you can be granted asylum. There are other immigration policies where you can apply to come to the United States to work and to live. There's various ways of doing that, but that process doesn't involve or include crossing the border illegally across the river or walking through the desert. I spoke to a rancher who has just a few cattle recently, and he said that his ranch house was broken into, and all that was stolen was water and soda. So we know that they're just on foot or just coming across the state of Texas without sufficient resources, and so that's dangerous. And also what's been reported, some of the reasons that congressmen and senators in Washington want to impeach Secretary Homeland Security Mayorkas is because of the rise in accidental deaths from poisoning due to fentanyl, which is now considered to be the number one cause of death for young people. And also, there's been a rise in child sex trafficking, which is awful to even think about. And another unintended consequence, I think, is terrorism. Terrorists have been coming across. Terrorists have been coming across. But the reason Lexi's barking is because this is the end of my time. I'm Todd Marquardt. I'll talk to you later.